Hi, I'm Venk,
And I'm Jaya.
and this is the Reality Hate episode 22. Just some housekeeping notes. You love us, you like us. No, you like us, you love us. So hit that like button and smash that subscribe button.
Smash it.
Like, we're really trying to work for your love here, and we're working hard. So love us.
Yes,
And
please.
you the hot goss. So we have a lot to discuss. We also exciting. We have our legal expert, Jeanine Zalduendo, coming on later on the show.
Yes.
So that's really exciting to talk about The Housewife and the Hustler, which was on Hulu this week.
So good.
Very enlightening. Also
eye-opening.
Deeply painful to watch, actually. Like,
yes.
It makes my, like, I used to really like Erica and be excited about her like hits, and those songs have, now if you listen to her songs, you're literally like, how many F's do you give? You should give a lot.
Right.
You did a lot.
A lot.
So a little on some other of the franchises.
Yes.
Shall we start with OC, Jaya?
Yes. Before we give you a quick rundown of Beverly Hills, we're going to skip New York this week because not much happened. It was a filler episode. We're going to double up next week for you. So we're going to just touch on Beverly Hills because it was also a filler episode.
Yeah.
We want to talk about some things that are happening in the other franchises.
Yep.
Big
shakeup with OC. Heather Dubrow's in. Bronwyn's out. Elizabeth is out, and Kelly Dodd is out.
Kelly Dodd, bye-bye.
I think it's really interesting. We are seeing a big shift, and I think this episode is going to be more serious in nature, but because we're really seeing the culture of these franchises shift in a lot of ways. I don't know if they're adding any people of color to the OC, but the elimination of Kelly Dodd and some of her very problematic points of views is really healthy for Bravo, especially because the franchises have been so segregated, and then in the last 4 years, we have seen some really terrible things come out of the mouths of these housewives who are making money.
Yep.
Saying whatever they think they can say.
Exactly. They think they can get away with being offensive, and they are dated. And I'm glad Bravo's cleaning house because
we should not be giving, and I will say this, I believe Kelly Dodd is a racist.
She is.
My opinion. And eliminating a racist, taking away a platform from every racist individual is how we progress.
Exactly.
Then we're moving on to
Heather Dubrow coming back. I'm going to say she's not my favorite character. She was not my favorite. She just wasn't. I didn't love her. There were things about her and her husband that sort of drove me bonkers, but I would much rather have her than the 3 that have been taken off.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to move on just yet. Bronwyn was a terrible example of somebody. It would be like, I'm sorry, Caitlyn Jenner is a terrible example of from the trans community. I would rather see other people be represented and given space and given platforms. So I'm happy Bronwyn is gone as well. It would be, it is nice. The idea of having a member of the LGBTQIA+ community
is great, just not Bronwyn.
But it's not, not the one. Not the one. And then Elizabeth.
And Elizabeth, nothing happened. I mean, her cult story happened. There was not much there. She didn't have anything to bring to the table. So I'm glad she was dead weight. Let's cut the dead weight, Bravo. Let's cut the dead weight.
These are interesting times in Bravo. Now I think there's some Jen Shaw SLC. So she's trying to present to the judge that she didn't have her contacts in. So she see her Miranda rights,
Right.
and she's trying to make that
Somehow shimmy out of it.
It's not going to work.
You did a terrible thing.
She is a horrible human, and
Yep.
she did a terrible thing, and she should pay the price.
Agreed.
You can't just, and what I find so interesting, this is the power of having an ego. You think you're running game on so many people for so long, you don't think you'll ever get caught, to the point that you will put yourself on television.
On national television, because you think you're going to get away with it. You didn't.
It's seen How to Get Away with Murder. This is the real world. Okay.
Let's move into it.
Recap.
Because we've got a lot to talk about. We're going to run through Beverly Hills. Again, like we said, it was a filler episode. New York and Beverly Hills did election week. So that is pretty much where we were at. Not a lot happens. We thought this week, I mean, the reveal at the top of the Beverly Hills was Erica is filing for divorce. So it's the beginning of the drama. But that's it. That's all we get.
This is what irritates me sometimes when Bravo does this. So the previous episode, when they get the text, I thought we were going to go straight into the drama.
I did too.
This episode.
They make us fill.
But it's not, they think it's building more anticipation. It actually does the opposite. It makes me annoyed because I feel like I've wasted an hour of my time.
Right. Well, we did, because nothing happens, right? Nothing really happens. I mean, it's not what we care about, you know? Yeah. We open on Erica driving to the party. She's going to finally face the girls after she's kept it from them. I mean, she knew this was happening. She knew what was going on, whether she'd like to admit it or not. And we end with Erica, and we start on election day. Kyle's throwing an election day party. And everybody's getting ready. And then we get to the fact that, I guess, you know, unbeknownst to us, Kyle and Dorit had an issue on the airplane on the way home. Basically, Kyle wanted to chime in and say something to Crystal when Dorit was talking. Dorit snapped at her and was nasty, so much so that it made Kyle cry. And there's
Kyle is a crybaby.
She is a crybaby, but Dorit is the worst, in my opinion.
Can she be cryberry? That was cute. Cryberry. You said cryberry. She is cryberry. Dorit has a way of. It feels like she just doesn't like smoothly. When she's escalating, it's like boom boom. It's like.
I know. It's like her fashion.
Oh, it's true. Yeah.
I mean, it is. It is.
You really heard
if you noticed in the episode, they all had the vote hair clip in. They were all wearing the rhinestone vote clips.
I don't want this to be a thing.
It's a thing like, on the Housewives.
It literally looks like you're trying to talk to like everybody out in outer space. Like you're trying to get maybe
they might be. And so we find out that there's an issue there. I said at the top of the show that Erica was coming to the election party. She was not going to the election party. She was going to Sutton's Parisian party. There were so many parties.
There was a lot of parties. It doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah.
Moving on. Yeah. Basically, let's get to the important points. We get to the party. Dorit arrives covered in Louis Vuitton. These women love Louis Vuitton. They all arrive with some form of Louis Vuitton on them. And Dorit is head to toe Louis Vuitton. And she and Kyle go to have a discussion about their issue. Dorit cannot see the forest through the trees and basically does not see where Kyle is coming from. Basically, she just wants Kyle to like keep quiet, be a submissive friend, and they can't have a real discussion. I mean, Dorit can't just say, I see where you're coming from, where Kyle was saying, I understand where you're coming from, and there's an issue. And of course, Dorit has to storm off.
I cannot stand, just to keep the peace. It's like, why don't you try to listen?
Yes.
Dorit has that issue.
Yes.
It reminds me of some people I know in my life.
Me too. Yeah, she just doesn't even want to. So then she storms off and she has to leave the party immediately. Fine. She's annoying anyway. And then one of the other big reveals at the party was that Crystal was bulimic and has an eating disorder, or it has struggled in the past with an eating disorder. And she's very open about it. And Lisa Rinna gives her props for being open about it. Her husband is very shocked that she would share something like that. I like her husband.
Oh, I like him too.
He seemed cool. He also seemed kind of like surprised by Crystal's discussion about her bulimia.
Because I think Crystal she's trying to be more open, but I think generally she's a person that has an understandable guard up. It's Beverly Hills, it's LA. Everybody has a little bit of a barrier that you have to maintain.
And she really opened up about that.
Yeah. I gotta say, it was really interesting when they supercut that with the conversation that Lisa Rinna forced her daughter to have.
Right.
They've attempted to make it seem like producers have attempted to make it seem like the whole conversation with Lisa Rinna and her daughter was appropriate. And I in my opinion, a conversation about that with a minor, and she was a minor at the time, correct? Was just as like ludicrous to me as exposing as Ramona from New York exposing her daughter's letter to her dad while they're getting a divorce.
I agree with you. I mean, I think Lisa Rinna is trying to use it as like a platform, like, oh, because, and she says it, because of my daughter, now Kyle felt more open to talk about her issues, and this person and this person and this person. I don't know. I mean, maybe her daughter wanted to talk about it, but I would not put my child in that.
It's a
I just wouldn't, I guess it's personal choice. I just wouldn't. But it was interesting.
It was.
There were also the discussion among the husbands about the women and their trip, and like PK again, Dorit and PK. PK, of course, is backing his wife up, and Crystal, and how inappropriate it was. And you could see that Rob and Kyle's husband were both like, what? Like, okay. Like, the fact that you're indulging in this drama is hilarious. But like, PK
reminds me a lot of Ken in his meddlesome, like,
he's 10 times worse than Ken.
Oh, he said, by the way, the other day I was at the Abbey and in the afternoon and having lunch, and I was seeing Ken walking with trash bags, like literally walking around, because right next to Pump. He was like, he had like 3 trash bags.
I love it.
I was like, can't be like that though. Can't be always about working. His wife has him straight. That old man, he's carrying.
I love it.
Jeans on, carrying bags.
I love it. Yeah, so then we jump from that, and Garcelle and Sutton go shopping for a car. Sutton's buying herself a Bentley. Must be nice. Good for her to buy her. It's her first car on her own.
She bought her on her own, and I will say that, look, because it's so opulent, I think people will side eye it, and I mean, I would.
Good for her.
Yeah, good for her. I think it makes her feel like she has a sense of freedom, and she hasn't had that sense of freedom for a long time in her life. So yeah, I'm happy.
I will say throughout the entire episode, the theme was everyone was discussing the fact that Erica's filing for divorce, and it was at the election party. It was at Sutton's car buying. Every conversation that was had throughout the episode was, how do you feel? Are you shocked? it seemed like everyone was shocked about Erica's divorce, except for Kyle, who we don't know yet why they're divorcing. Everything hasn't come out yet, but Kyle said, I guess when you look at it, sure, it's shocking, but when you really take a look at their relationship and you look at it from afar, like it's not at all shocking. She was the only one that wasn't surprised, where everyone else was like, I can't believe it. Like, oh,
Can I tell you my favorite moment?
yes.
Garcelle saying, why couldn't you just wait?
Oh my gosh. How about that? Why couldn't you just wait? And everyone's like, what do you mean? She's like,
I knew exactly what she meant.
I did too.
But since we know she couldn't wait now because we are aware of the legal nonsense going on.
But I thought that was hilarious.
I was like, if it was back then and I was in that situation, I'd be like, yeah, I'd wait too.
I would just wait it out, Erica. You're almost there.
How many fucks can I give?
I mean, you're almost there. But yeah, so that happens. And then we finally, there's a meeting of, Kathy, Kyle, and Sutton at Sutton's store. Kathy makes me laugh always.
I enjoy Kathy.
She's hilarious. She is the comic relief. So at that meeting where she's like basically telling Sutton, like, you need to do all these things in your place. Like these are issues.
Where's the table over there?
Yeah, exactly. Comic relief.
Kathy Hilton voice.
Comic relief. I mean, she she kills me. She was fresh off of Botox. You could see that she had like just filled her face.
I love her. I want to be so lucky to be Kathy Hilton.
Right? I mean, seriously, she was pulling up in her Bentley.
Mm-hmm.
And then we quickly jump to Lisa and her husband in Harry's garden. He loves her. They have a sweet relationship. I love that he makes her do a fire drill and they have all these things and what have you. It was enjoyable.
Yeah. Harry is
he's great.
He's always been a beauty. He's still even though he's
aged well.
Oh, like a fine wine.
Right.
Oh, anyway.
That's your Beverly Hills husband choice.
Well, no. Nobody can ever be as fine as Kyle's husband.
Mario?
Mr. Umansky.
I mean, Mauricio. Why did I call him Mario? I'm thinking of Ramona. I'm confusing my housewives. Mauricio. Mauricio is not my type. You love that Mauricio.
That's it for me. That man, I mean, he's one of the most successful real estate agents. He's got this smile, and I just want to give him a kiss.
I love it. He's a great husband. He is a great husband.
That's always why I'm initially attracted to somebody.
Yes.
When they're a good husband to their wives.
That's a good husband, but so is Harry Hamlin. He's a very good husband.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next part is Sutton's party. There's one moment where Kyle goes to Crystal's house and Crystal has left a Hermes bag on her table and it's a $95,000 Hermes bag. Did you see that? Do you remember the little like house bag?
That bag's $95,000.
$95,000. And I said it. Yes, I said a bad word. $95,000. Yeah. Anyways, it needed a moment. And then we get to the party, right? And Lisa and Kyle show up in the same dress. I think Kyle's right. I think Rinna always wears the same clothes as everybody else. She's always the one that shows up wearing someone else's outfit.
I mean,
they all have Louis Vuitton on again. There's a million Louis Vuitton rolling around.
I wish they would at least attempt to bring in some new designers, young hot designers. Every showroom in Los Angeles carries some of the newer up and coming designers. Like, ladies, be current.
Yes.
I mean, mix the Louis Vuitton in with some other things.
They mix it in, but it's in every episode. They just love it. And then basically we kind of end there because we are waiting for Erica, and she is in her car ride, not to the election party, but to Sutton's Parisian party, to buy her things from her store. And that's it. We are not going to get anything until next week. That's okay, because we have the Hustler and the Housewife, and we have
special guest and fan of the show, but also Reality Hate F's legal expert, Jeanine Zalduendo. Jeanine Zalduendo, legal expert, and let's get into the Hustler and the Housewife, or the Housewife and the Hustler.
Housewife and the Hustler, Hustler and Housewife.
Oh.
Either way, they're terrible people.
No, we're so sad about it because she was one of my favorite characters on the show.
Can I make one point in reference to when they asked her if she knew? If you notice her body language, she goes like this. Ask me the question if I knew.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm going to ask, did you know?
No, I didn't. And she's shaking her head yes the entire time. That's such a psychological tell that her body's providing the answer and her brain is saying something different. And I was really struck by that moment.
As an attorney, because that's why you're our legal expert on Reality AF, I have to ask you, how much does somebody's body language play into your assessment of whether they're telling the truth or lying? Like, do you take that into consideration?
I mean, you definitely can. When you're questioning a witness in a deposition or a trial and you think that they're being evasive or they're not telling the truth, you can absolutely comment on that or dig into sort of the facts that you have that support a contrary answer and try to catch them in a lie. I mean, that's really like the entirety of examining a witness at trial is waiting for that moment where you can present them with something that says the exact opposite of what they're trying to say. And so sometimes you're led into that exact moment based on their body language.
So.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So Hustler and the Housewife. So, if you watched the last episode, didn't you? And we barely get into it in this last episode. Right now, we just know that Erica is filing for divorce. We don't know, everything is about to come out. She filed for divorce, and I remember being shocked when she filed for divorce, and then everything came out, right? That he had all these legal woes and he was laundering money and what have you. After watching The Housewife and the Hustler, The Hustler and the Housewife, H&H, I have come to the conclusion that she knew, right? I mean, 20 million was put in, given to her company. And I mean, you and I have discussed it, and I think you and I both agree that basically they divorced to kind of hide assets, right? And move things around.
One of the other things, if I may interject quickly, one of the other things I found interesting was she's actually listed as one of the secretaries of one of the companies. Not like a secretary, like the secretary of one of the companies, right?
Yeah, one of his LLCs.
Yeah.
I don't know that says much in terms of her ability to their movement of assets necessarily, but so I did brush up on divorce law today, and the hiding of the assets thing is tricky because I've heard a lot that, she's trying, and they say it in the documentary, that she is trying to claim that gifts to her are her separate property. But that's not how the law works. There are gifts and then there are gifts. If you receive a gift from your parents, or if you received a gift before you got married, that's typically considered separate property with some certain rules. Gifts between spouses are marital property, and there's several reasons for that. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, it's considered marital property. And that's usually because marital property is used to purchase the item. And then usually it's commingled with other assets. For example, if you gift your spouse money and it's conjoined in your community property, it's community property. If you gift your spouse art and it's indistinguishable from the art in the rest of your house and you use it together, it's probably community property. You can exempt property by signing an agreement and specifically stating this is separate property that is a gift. Short of that, if it's a large asset, it really needs that sort of agreement. Otherwise, it's community property. Small gifts, small value gifts relative to the size of the estate can just be considered gifts, and that's fine. But I'm guessing the assets that they're trying to transfer between them are large ticket items that would require some sort of post-nuptial agreement to consider them separate property. So I don't know how they're going to get around that. And, you know, courts will look at the timing of any of these sort of later coming agreements. And if the timing lines up with like claims against him and then major moving of assets, I mean, that's indicative, that can be indicative of fraud and sort of prove the case against them.
And so they didn't have a postnuptial.
They had no prenup.
No prenup, no postnup. So even if they tried to do one now, that can be committing fraud. Clearly.
I mean, I think that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, I mean, just in general, I think, you know, it's hard often to have hard evidence of fraud. Sometimes fraud can be sort of circumstantial, or, you know, what lies in the cracks between what we know can demonstrate sort of circumstance that tell an untoward story. And certainly like timing of transfers and agreements and stuff like that can definitely build a case for fraud. You know, there's a complaint that was filed, I think it was in December of 2020, by the Edelson law firm. And that's the law firm that was the local counsel of Girardi Keese for the Lion Air crash lawsuits.
Chicago?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And so they were his local counsel, and, you know, they were there assisting the victims and with all of that. And then separately, they're entitled to their own fees once the settlement payments were received. And so they filed their lawsuit sort of for two major reasons. One is that they don't think that all of the victims received their payouts or full payouts. And the second is that they didn't receive their funds as they were entitled as counsel on the matter. And that complaint is really interesting to read. And that's where we learn some of these facts. Well, they're sort of regurgitated from other complaints because there's so many against Tom and his law firm at this point. But that sort of re-rose to the surface, this allegation that that the law firm transferred to EG Global, $20 million. Now, I think that happened before 2019 because it was listed in a separate complaint, and the separate complaint was in 2019. So we do know it was a few years ago. It wasn't sort of in the wake of the divorce. And I think some of that like timeline has been a little conflated in the news to make it seem like a more devastating story.
Right. Yes.
Not that it needs that, because it's already pretty bad.
You know what I mean? You know what I found really interesting and kind of heartbreaking in the same way. I found it heartbreaking that all these people who have been affected, you know, and really the anchors of the documentary were those two women, best friends since childhood.
With the son, with both sons, yes. And
they felt so hopeless because of the power Tom Girardi had here. Gavin Newsom, everybody,
everyone.
Who were they going to go to? And it was only until people of equal power were like, you owe us money. And really, it made me question how people can get, you know, their due when somebody is of that level of power. And I mean, if you can speak to that.
I mean, I think it's endemic in a society where we have like campaign financing, you know, like money curries favor. It happens all over the world. You know, it's not just campaign financing, but it happens everywhere where people with money have access to people with power.
Right.
And it's currency, you know, and it's very, very, very troubling. And I think, you know, like, even with certain like limitations on gift giving to political campaigns, like he can give personally, he could give through his his various corporate entities. Like there's so many ways he can buy power. And if you think about the breadth of the, you know, individuals that they listed that he had these sort of really tight relationships with, it's another piece of, you know, circumstantial evidence that demonstrates this might have been a long running fraud, that he was, you know, he was sort of buying his insurance policy, so to speak, while he was committing fraud.
Over 40 years, they think.
Yeah.
You know, what it really comes down to is over 40 years. My other question to you is, so, you know, there had to be a lot of players in the moving of money. I mean, it couldn't have been Tom Girardi just hiding these, you know, taking these large sums, putting people off. There had to be so many players. I know that Keese is now suing. They filed their own lawsuit against Tom Girardi. Like, so they had nothing to do with it. I mean, I'm having a hard time kind of understanding that. When I saw that at the end of the documentary, I was like, but wait, he didn't do this on his own. These are hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, this did not happen on his own.
Can I piggyback on what Jay just said with, like, is it a tactic, because it's a joint law firm, is it a tactic to separate so they don't get attacked?
So law firms have various protections. You know, you can be an LLC or an LLP, and there's, you know, the structure can provide certain benefits in terms of what your assets, you know, what assets can be gone after. And I think they were a limited partnership or a limited liability partnership. So that's tricky. But also in the complaint from the Edelson firm against them, it states that they believe, so when you file a complaint, it's all the facts that you think are true, and you hope to prove them as true throughout the course of the litigation. And you get to take discovery to help you do that. So this is, you know, a complaint is the story you want to tell pre-discovery based on the things you're pretty sure about. It's called having information and belief that X, Y, or Z is true. And so they state on information and belief that Girardi was the sole equity partner of his firm and had sole access to all the firm's bank accounts. And apparently that's what the Edelson firm had been told in the course of trying to investigate what was going on with the funds that were going to the Lion Air crash victims. Because apparently in the summer of 2020, when the payments were supposed to be starting to roll out, he was told, one of the partners at Edelson firm was told that, well, Tom is the sole person with access to the bank accounts, and he's, you know, has a medical emergency, is in the hospital. And so until he's able to attend to these matters, we can't, you know, tell you an update. Perhaps that's true, but if it is true, that seems very odd for his partners. And again, I'm not familiar with the structure of their partnership, but based on certain, like, you know, liability that could attach to them as a result of being in a partnership, I would think that they would want to know what was happening with the accounting. And then separately, if they did know, then they're complicit.
Right.
So it's kind of like they're either negligent or they're complicit, and it's really hard to sort of understand at this point what was going on. But they were certainly lying on his behalf. I think there's no universe in which they didn't know something weird was going on.
Right. Something.
And perpetuating a story to buy him time. And again, maybe he was telling them a story that, like, you know, we're defaulting on these loans. But again, like, if you're working for a law firm and you have a healthy supply of cases, I think they had 900 cases or something like that, 9,000, some large number of cases. Presumably you're getting paid on them. You know, you would hope you're winning some percentage of them. So I just find it very odd what story he possibly could have told his partnership to explain what was happening.
And the other thing that I find interesting is, so he was the one in control. That's what they're saying, right?
Right.
Then when they're dealing with clients, and I'm trying to make a connection, and forgive me, I'm not obviously a lawyer, so it just seems interesting. On one hand, he is the head, the head, which seems confusing to me because in a partnership you'd want to spread.
Well, yeah, that's where I'm not
But
understanding.
then with their clients, they just toss them off like
They just get shuffled around.
and I don't know if there's a connection there. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Clarify that for us.
I mean, I can clarify to a point, but what it seems like they were doing doesn't make complete sense. So it's hard to explain.
Okay.
So, that's a partnership. He had partners. He wasn't a second name partner. So you would think that he had some skin in the game, some understanding of what was going on. I find it hard to believe that they were receiving litigation funding. So typically, like when you're representing a plaintiff, sometimes you take those cases on contingency. So you hope you win. You don't collect any payments during the course of the litigation, but you take a larger percentage of what you receive at the end. But that's risky and it's costly. So sometimes firms will receive loans from litigation funders to fund that process. And then they'll get their, the litigation funders will get their money back with a percentage. The firm will make some money and there's a successful outcome. So I find it hard to believe that they had all these litigation funders and loans without anyone besides Tom understanding the scope of that amount of money. You would think that these other partners had active caseloads and were bringing money in and were monitoring sort of their the client trust funds. In the litigation, the Edelson litigation, they said again that Tom was the sole person that had control and access to the client trust fund. So in the Edelson law firm, they said that Tom was the sole individual with access to the client trust accounts, which strikes me as a little bit weird because not all of these clients are Tom's clients, so to speak. Other partners could have brought in the actions, could have settled the actions, could be receiving the money on behalf of their clients. And so I find it a complete derogation of your duties to your clients to not know if the money's come in, how much they're owed, to be on top of getting your money to your clients, totally separate from whatever Tom is doing. So that strikes me as really weird. And I have heard rumors for years that they do shuffle clients around. I took over a case a few years back for a couple in Beverly Hills that was trying to fight a foreclosure on their property. And their former attorneys were Girardi Keese. Totally passed around for years. They paid, large sums of money to the firm to essentially do nothing for them. And I thought I remember at the time, you have in your mind as a lawyer in LA, this sort of very, bigger than life conception of who Tom Girardi is and things that he's achieved in his whole career. And so this was one of my first interactions with someone that had come from them, and looking at the, dare I say, terrible job that had been done prior, I was really shocked. And I was like, I at the time was like, well, maybe it's the client, maybe there's something wrong with this client, and that's why they're not doing diligent work. But in the end, it wasn't the client, it was that they didn't really care. And I don't know if they were just milking them for funds for as long as they possibly could.
And these are people that were fighting a foreclosure. That's
exactly.
My question is, how is this legal? How is
it's not. That's not.
So essentially, your former clients could also go after them for not doing their job. I want to know.
I mean, so there's legal malpractice, but unless you suffer damages as a result of the legal malpractice, it's really hard to go after. So if their house had been foreclosed and they could say it was because this firm blew a deadline or disregarded their request, lawyers are supposed to take the advice of their clients. They're not supposed to go rogue. So, there's certain circumstances in which they could have sued them for malpractice, but this didn't really rise to that level. What they could have done perhaps is complain to the state bar and say, we paid them X amount over this amount of time and they literally did nothing for us. it seems like there were many complaints made to the
Yes.
state bar over the years.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if that would have led anywhere, but it is leading somewhere now. I mean, there's a movement to disbar him. He's never going to practice law again. Although his brother claims he has Alzheimer's and he's never going to practice again anyway.
82 years old and apparently has Alzheimer's, and his brother, you know,
all of a sudden has Alzheimer's.
right.
Which to me is BS. I mean, come on. Like, it doesn't, and I know you can't say that. Like, I know illegal, that's not illegal.
Well, the timing, I mean, it's unbelievable.
The timing seems a rather fishy.
Right.
Yeah, everything about it, like, and this is the thing, again, going back to sort of our discussion of circumstantial evidence of fraud, you would think that like such an incredible attorney who his whole life was fighting cases of fraud would know what looks fishy on the outside and not do it, you know? And that's why I just am scratching my head. Like, every move that they've made seems so irresponsible and obvious.
Yes.
And does he just think he's purchased all the power insurance policies he could possibly need, and he's the smartest guy in the room, and no one's going to put this together? Like, it doesn't make sense.
It does not make any sense. And I definitely think Erica knew. I mean, after watching that, I felt like,
how could she not know? I'm
exactly.
sorry.
How could she not know?
Jeanine,
I struggle with that. Like, I could see how she might not understand the scope of it. Like, if you, for example, think about Bernie Madoff's situation. I could see how his wife maybe wouldn't know the like scope of the Ponzi scheme he was running. And like, you know, women stay out of it as long as their purse is full. Like, hey, you know, like, I'm not going to ask questions. That could be possible. But I think you get to the point where they're filing for divorce. There absolutely are discussions about how to preserve their assets. And I think it's in that moment that she's probably, if not already aware, made fully aware of the amount of debt and creditors that he has and the situation that he's in. I just don't see.
But you don't think before that? I think she did know that, you know? I just think.
I think it's.
He was bankrolling her lifestyle.
I think it's certainly possible. And I go back and forth. I like, ask me tomorrow and I'll be like, oh, she totally knew the whole time.
I think it was the behind the scenes interviews that made it so nasty, that made me think, you know what I mean? You're not a good person. Because what I saw in behind the scenes interviews, I did not like. Like, that was a person that
no, Jeanine, please continue. And then I was
gonna say, like, I definitely disliked her in those behind the scenes interviews, and they made me really just totally think she was a terrible person. However, she's so vain and so egoic. And unless you're a complete sociopath, I feel like it would be really hard to be so confident about your wealth and extravagance if you knew it was a sham. If you knew it was stolen.
I question whether she is a sociopath or not.
Yeah,
her behavior kind of like leans towards being a sociopath.
I had like, so a few, you know, when Erica Jane first joined the Real Housewives, Erica Girardi, sorry, first joined the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I was obviously a huge fan. I think every gay man in America was like, how many months do I give? But I had a conversation with a friend and they were like, you know, she like left her kid in like the Midwest and like went off to do her thing. Like, and I don't want, no, I am making a judgment. I'm making a judgment. She absconded her duties as a mother to go, and she did lock in a man. I don't know the relationship she has with her son. Her son is never on the show. He is part of the LAPD, correct?
He does live with them in Pasadena, or lived, because they no longer have that home.
Yeah. So after that, I always kind of looked at Erica Girardi as duplicitous. There was an interesting thing, and I want to bring it up real quick, on Bravo and Radio Andy. And I had spoken with Jay about this, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. somebody, either it was a caller or it was a guest, somebody had said, Andy, do you think that this will affect her on the show? And he's like, no. And then somebody said, well, I mean, nobody wants to see someone with that much money, knowing with all these things she has done. Nobody wants her riches to rags to riches story. Nope. And you know, it's funny because as much as I dislike Teresa Giudice, and she had a shady situation and she spent time in the slammer, I prefer her riches to rags to riches story than Erica Girardi.
Agreed.
I'm not saying that I like Teresa at all, but if I had to pick between the two, it would be the table flip.
Well, I think it's easier to be slightly sympathetic to someone who has paid their social dues for their wrongdoing. Exactly. And, you know, Erica may or may not ever have to do that. But yeah, I saw that interview and I saw the question come in, and I think it was a really important one because, you know, we just came out of a global pandemic. A ton of people lost their homes, a ton of people lost their jobs, you know, and to see sort of this opulence with no regard to consequences, it's really hard for people to watch and enjoy, frankly. I mean, you know, not that all of the housewives have honest livings, but some of them, you know, them and their spouses actually really work hard. And I just think it's like one thing to have that kind of wealth that you've earned, and it's another to just have this specter of theft and misappropriation of other people, and not only just other people, but like people who are desperate in need of assistance, orphans, you know, like it's just really
a man who's the rest of his life is destroyed. He's burned from head to toe and will have surgery after surgery. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And it's not like she downsized. You know, we were talking about this earlier. She downsized to a house that's $7,500 a month, you know, so, you know, it's 2,000 square feet, it's 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Give me a break, you know?
The thing is, like, for us in LA, hearing somebody spend $7,000 a month on an apartment is not as crazy as the rest of the country, but the show is not just for people living in high net worth cities like Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco. It's for people in Idaho who think, who pay mortgages for 5-bedroom homes that are $1,500 a month. It's just ridiculous. I think it's a shift. I think people are wanting to be a little, they're changing their the way
it's environmental. It's not only, you know, there are a lot of factors playing here, right? And so we don't want to look like wasteful, or at least I would hope that people don't want to look like they are wasteful humans. And I mean, we're entering a new phase. We're coming out of a pandemic. We are in, you know, a new world.
Yeah.
What do you feel, in your professional opinion, what do you feel like the conclusion of this saga will be?
I mean, that's tricky. There's going to be discovery in this civil action, at least one of them, and there's multiple. And whatever is sort of comes to light through that will perhaps dictate what goes, you know, if this comes to like a criminal investigation, and it's probably already being investigated criminally and we just don't fully know the extent. But, you know, I think unless there's protective orders over the information, you know, we will get some drips and drabs from the litigation process as in terms of like what is actually going on behind the scenes. He's going to owe a lot of money, I think. And I think
nothing left either, right? I mean, there is nothing.
And I
had 80 million at one point.
Right? That's what he said. Yeah. In his deposition, he said he had 80 million in assets and then 50 million in cash. And now he's got
nothing,
like 8,000 in his bank account.
What do you think of prison? Do you think that's going to be avoided?
He's 82. They wouldn't put him in prison at this point, right?
They put Bill Cosby in prison. I mean, they're not above putting old men who've committed ghastly crimes in prison. So I think if there's legitimate evidence of, you know, theft of embezzlement of client funds, I think that he could go to jail. I mean, I think that remains to be seen, but you know, from the outside, certainly it looks like that might be the case. But again, you know, we want to maintain sort of innocent until proven guilty. So it's one thing to speculate about the civil case and to say, you know, like what's probably happening there. It's a lower standard of proof. But, you know, in terms of criminally, I think we have to wait and see, but it's not looking good. I'll say that.
The scope to me is so grand. When the documentary, because I didn't know about the Indonesian flight.
Yes.
So knowing that this is not only a national scandal, but an international scandal really, you know, shocks me. That interview with that young man really was so upsetting, because at the end of the day, you know, you want to believe that when something bad happens to the little guy has an opportunity to win. And I hope that the outcome is that those who have committed these atrocities pay the price, because the victims are right now paying the price.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you know, the average person just doesn't have enough understanding of how our legal system works. It's unfortunate. And because of that, the people that do can really manipulate the situation. You know, the way that they explain to the burn victim in the documentary about like, oh, like this justice who was the mediator for this case, he really cares about you and he doesn't want you to have money. You know, the average person is like, oh, okay, you know, like, sure, the judges care about me. Like, they don't know that that's completely outside of the bounds of what has ever happened in the history of a mediation. Like, that's not what's going on, but you don't know that. And just to take advantage of that situation in that way, that for me was just the fact that he was saying that was such clear evidence of like knowing wrongdoing. Like, that was like a complete, he contrived that whole story and gave it with such like detail and conviction. And I'm like, that takes so much forethought and, you know, like, it's just, it's active wrongdoing. And that is like a total, you know, that's not negligence. That's like, oh, I didn't realize I didn't pay you. Oops. Like, no, that's like,
well, even the $135,000 that woman was owed for the sling for, you know, and she couldn't get that money out of him. And he was like, I'm sorry. I know you're angry. They haven't paid. I'm a good guy.
I do not believe Erica is a victim.
I don't either.
She wasn't a convincing liar in the show. And the few times it was brought up and she, you know, when she's shaking her head, yes. And then again, she was asked, you know, like, did anybody know? And she said, only Tom would know that.
Only Tom. Yes.
But who answers a question that way? You know, like that was such a bizarre answer. And she doesn't say it with conviction. If that were me, I would be so irate. I wouldn't be able to shut up about how angry I was. And you know, there might be legal implications for her overspeaking. So she might've been told, like, you can give a yes or no answer.
Except her firm dropped her when, you know, well, we haven't seen the Real Housewives, but after this documentary came out, she was, which we should touch on quickly, you know, they did drop her, right? They did drop her. As soon as this came out, they said, we can no longer represent you. Now, Jeanine, insights on that. There are only a few reasons, right, why that would happen for the most part.
So it's complicated because we will probably never know because of the attorney-client privilege, but it can be that you no longer see eye to eye with your client, that you are telling them one thing and they are insisting on something else and you've reached an impasse and, you know, for whatever reason, you're not able to do what the client wants. And whatever that is, we don't know. It could be you found out information that, again, like ethically, you can't continue to represent them. There could be other conflicts of interest, et cetera. based on the timing, it does seem like it's potentially related to the documentary coming out.
Yeah.
And that could be for numerous reasons. It could be because this law firm wants more publicity and they're doing this sort of as a stunt in their own regard. But
do you feel like that's really likely, or do you feel like the information is so damning?
so, it's hard to speculate, but it is curious that they dropped her right after. And so I'm wondering, this is just pure speculation, if she told them one version of events and then they see on this show that maybe she was lying or that something else is true, because I don't think she probably had any access to what was going to be revealed beforehand. So she, likely couldn't have known what they would eventually find out.
Right.
So that's certainly possible. But again, it could just be a strategic difference too, that she wants them to do certain things, or that could be fully legal and they're counseling her against that, or whatever.
I mean, they did stress after they dropped her, right? You need to seek legal, like you need to find new representation.
Well, that's required. When you can't like abandon a client and leave them in the lurch without representation, especially if the case is ongoing. So usually there's some delicacy there about making sure that they're represented before you decline counsel, or if not, that they're fully informed of their need to get replacement counsel, et cetera. So
how is she gonna pay for this all, you guys?
Oh, she's
selling her jewelry that she has not disclosed.
Like, I've been like, they're in such big trouble. They owe so much money. And also having a lawyer is expensive. So like, how are they paying for this?
I feel like
how is she paying for her $7,000 a month house?
I have a question. It's a little bit of a pivot, but I found it really interesting how Andy Cohen downplayed the documentary by saying, well, they had $25,000 sunglasses on and
Dana Wilkie,
yeah,
least favorite housewife ever.
They had Dana Wilkie and they had
Danielle Staub
on. Did you find it curious that he downplayed their presence on the show to diminish the importance of the documentary?
So I'm not gonna lie, I had the same reaction when I first watched the show. I was like, these are the housewives they've cobbled together.
Yeah, I did too.
$25,000 sunglasses. It was like, give me a break.
And my
Danielle Staub made a little bit more sense.
Yeah, Danielle.
Apparently Dana Wilkie was the first to break the news that a beloved housewife was getting divorced several weeks before they announced their divorce. So she wins the prize for knowing that information before it was known publicly.
She knew. I mean, it seems to me that she was like on the pulse of that.
The thing about her, even though she came across ridiculously silly on the show, she does carry some leverage in this town. Like, she's not just nobody,
I mean, podcast.
But I think in general, the reason that they use these particular people is, one, because they did have some nexus to the story that's being told. Danielle was a stripper at the same club and Dana broke the story first. So there is some connection there, but also because they're not presently Real Housewives, they're under no sort of
contracts did not speak about the situation, right?
Exactly. So there's probably a limited pool of people that they could pull from to have comment on this show, and I'm sure that most of them had no connection to the story whatsoever, and these two did. So,
and I mean, Dana Wilkie seemed to know a lot. I mean, really, she had the gossip, for her podcast.
She kind of came across way more intelligent.
She did. Then when she was on the show with her $25,000, 25,000. One last thing.
Yeah.
Are we going to hear from Erin Brockovich?
I mean,
I would be surprised if she didn't make some sort of public statement of disappointment, but I don't, again, innocent till proven guilty. And I think at this point, yes, there's a lot of allegations swimming out there, but she might, and, with elegance and class, wait to comment until something has actually been decided by like a jury of his peers or a judge. in a way that we can say, okay, justice has run its course, and we know now that this is what happened. Otherwise it's maybe a little premature for someone of her caliber and, public face.
In the film, Aaron Brockovich, I actually didn't realize it wasn't the lawyer she worked with, that wasn't who Tom Girardi was. He was actually the person that kind of did the deal. He didn't have, the actor that played him had a kind of smaller role, but actually in real life, Tom had a bigger role.
Big role.
I hope they don't make this a film. But let's end on a fun note. If we were going to cast the film version of this, who would be playing Erica Girardi? Let's start with Dan, then we'll end with Jeanine.
No, don't start with me. I've got to think. Don't.
Okay, Jeanine, well,
you go first, Bank. You go first.
Okay. Margot Robbie.
That's what I was gonna say.
Totally Margot Robbie.
Yeah, totally agree.
Oh, sorry. Got excited. She left. Margot Robbie, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, Margot Robbie. How about Tom Girardi?
Is Tommy Lee Jones still alive?
No, he passed on.
Oh, dang it.
That would have been good. Oh, you know what? My client, Brian Cox.
No, Brian Cox. I mean, I love Brian Cox.
From Succession? I think he would be.
Don't get me wrong.
I think he would be great, but that's just me. But I'm partial because he's so nice.
Let me think.
This is tricky.
Anyone?
No, I'm sticking with my guy.
Okay, mine is Ed Harris.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with that because I haven't been able to think of anybody better that is.
I got outvoted. Ladies win. And I guess that is we got the leads of this terrible tragedy.
Margot Robbie and Ed Harris.
Again, Jeanine, thank you so much for coming back to our show and now, officially being our legal expert. Yes. And please come back again. Guys, please, we're not doing taglines today, but send us your taglines to realityhatef@gmail.com. That's that is REALITYHATEF@gmail.com. Also, please follow us on YouTube at realityhatef. Follow us on Instagram at realityhatef. And follow us on TikTok at realityhatef. We are almost to 500 followers on TikTok. We are at 100 followers on Instagram. And we are still at 44 followers on YouTube.
Can we fix that?
Please fix that for us. I mean, we have guests like this that come on.
Jeanine.
Like Jeanine.
Jeanine.
Let's give it up for Jeanine one more time.
Yay!
Thank you, Jeanine, so much. And thank you all for joining our show.
Bye.
Okay, start.
Blackwater. We like it.
So good.
Quenches that thirst.
So good.